Good afternoon. Welcome back to Tropical Chatter, your go-to source for online information regarding the 2017 hurricane season. Let's jump right into it as we have Hurricane Irma, Major Hurricane Irma, churning in the Atlantic right now. 180-mile-an-hour sustained winds in the core. This little area around the center of the circulation, 180-mile-an-hour sustained winds. Right now, the Hurricane Center has it moving west at 14 miles per hour. It has been wobbling west-northwest recently, and that is a good thing, because without that, the islands are in for a world of hurt. Right now, we have Puerto Rico and the islands to the east of it under hurricane warnings, northern end of Dominican Republic in hurricane watches, and the southern Bahamas in hurricane watches. Major Hurricane Irma means business. This is the strongest hurricane ever to form outside of the Caribbean and Gulf of Mexico. This area here has produced stronger storms, but never the Atlantic Ocean back here. It is a major hurricane, 180-mile-an-hour sustained winds, and the forecast track is not looking good. Without any more wobbles west, it should pass north of Puerto Rico, but just barely. If we do get any more wobbles due west, the core of major hurricane, Category 5, may pass directly over Puerto Rico, and that would be probably catastrophic for them. Something to take seriously. If you haven't completed your hurricane preparedness, hurricane preps, do that now. Rush it to completion. You are running out of time quickly. As for northern DR, I would do the same, and the southern Bahamas. Do it now. Don't rush it when you have to tomorrow and the next day. Complete your prep now. National Hurricane Center has the center of the hurricane moving generally in this direction here, skirting Cuba, and then coming up through the Florida Straits towards the Keys. After that, we'll get into that later. Options are on the table here. I do not believe it's going to make landfall in Cuba. I do think that is too far south. I think models will adjust, maybe bring it up in this area here. So that's something to keep an eye on. Last night, Euro brought it way down into Cuba. We're going to touch on this later. GFS a little bit offshore. Many options are on the table. I've been talking for the last few days on Twitter. If you don't follow me there, give me a follow. Stormforce_1. Last few days, I have been saying how I do not believe it's going to reach Cuba. I thought it would come up more so towards the eastern coast of Florida. We're going to touch on that later. But let's jump to the discussion and 48-hour outlook from the National Hurricane Center. Hurricane force winds extend out 60 miles, and tropical storm force winds 160 miles. So you do not need to be in the eye or the eye wall to get damaging, substantial weather from Major Hurricane Irma. It's a wide and far impacting system. It's a major hurricane, and it's one of the more intense ones you'll ever see in the Atlantic in the Atlantic Basin. Storm means business and needs to be taken very seriously. Ever wonder what a Category 5 hurricane waves look like? Well, this is from the National Hurricane Center Marine Graphics. Waves around the center of the storm may exceed 50 feet. In this area here, possibly 50-foot waves. And when that moves closer to the islands, those wave run-ups and storm surges are going to be huge. Huge. The storm surge could be 10, 15 feet, especially in those prone areas. I'm not too familiar with them islands, how elevated they are. The storm surge and waves will be monsters. You just need the prep. Besides the torrential rains and 100 and God knows how high winds, storm surge is the leading killer in hurricanes. Keep an eye on that. You need to seek shelter. You need to finish your hurricane prep. It's serious storm here. Let's jump to the satellite. This is Major Hurricane Irma. It's a thing of beauty, or what nightmares are made of, depending on how you look at it. These little red dots here are the National Hurricane Center forecast track. And as you can see, it's doing pretty well right now. Looks right on line. Category 5 right through the islands north of Puerto Rico. As you can see in the last couple frames, here's 17th degree. Oh, that's pretty bad line. Let me redo that here. I don't have a mouse using the pad here. It has been skirting just south of 17 degrees. Last couple frames, you have noticed, or I can notice, a west-northwest wobble here, which hurricane hunters have confirmed. It's finally gaining a little bit of latitude. And if it doesn't, I mean, these islands are in serious trouble. Serious trouble. Let me see if I can pause it. Let me see if I can pause this and talk about where those 180-mile-an-hour winds are. So obviously, in a hurricane, the strongest winds are right around the center. So you're talking about 180-mile-an-hour winds in this area here. Only in that area here. The hurricane winds may be in this area here, and tropical storm force winds are in a large, expansive area in that area. So rough estimate, as we talked about earlier, it's about 60 miles and 150 miles for hurricane winds and tropical storm force winds, respectively. Let's jump into another view so you get a different kind of idea how this storm is looking. This is the AVN color imagery. It shows the eye beautifully on here. Last night, there was more deeper reds and even some grays, maxing out our scale. I think it might be going through an eye wall replacement right now, which is common in these long track, intense hurricanes. This ring of red around the eye has been weakening. Almost positive it's going to flare back up in another couple hours. It's just an intense hurricane right now, and you can't understate that. So I want to jump into the tropical cyclone heat potential map. Excuse me. This map shows pretty much the fuel in the ocean. You need 80-degree water to start a hurricane or to maintain a hurricane, and that's not a problem. It's well warm in this area here. Tropical cyclone heat potential is more like the fuel beneath the surface. As these hurricanes move along, they churn up the ocean water from beneath, and it's usually cooler. As you get into these areas here, let me pull this up, you can see the tropical cyclone heat potential rises. And once you get into the middle of the scale here, or upper echelon of the scale, there's tons of fuel available for these hurricanes. So we already have a Category 5 right here. As you move closer to the islands in north of Puerto Rico, you can see we go up on the scale, and we're in the upper half, upper third possibly, of this scale. It's not good. It's already at 180-mile-an-hour sustained winds. As it gets into this higher tropical cyclone heat potential area, there is no shear, there's no dry air, there's nothing to hold this storm back except possible interaction with land. I would not be surprised after the eye wall replacement cycle if it strengthens even more. I'm not going to venture to guess how high the top winds get, but only God knows. I mean, as long as that pressure keeps dropping, which it is, these winds can continue to ramp up, as it is in just near perfect conditions for major hurricane development. It's a thing of beauty, actually. Science behind this is pretty incredible. So we have to watch. In about 24 hours, when it's getting closer to the islands in north of Puerto Rico, it encounters pretty much rocket fuel for hurricanes, and it is something to watch. I want to talk about. Let's move on to the next page here. Herbert boxes. If you follow my Twitter, I've been talking about these for seems like 3 or 4 or 5 days. Paul Herbert, back in the day, National Hurricane Center forecaster, came up with these 2 boxes here. One just east of Puerto Rico and one in the Central Caribbean or Western Caribbean. When a hurricane or major hurricane passes through these boxes, especially box number 1, it is more than likely going to impact or make landfall in either Florida or North Carolina. History has showed that over the years, time and time again. When it passes through this box here, it impacts Florida or North Carolina, and they both have equal shots pretty much. There are stats to back that up, and you've seen on my Twitter, I do not think it's going to reach the Gulf of Mexico. Why? Because from Atlantic City, we bet a lot down here, casinos are all over, and I know how to play the odds. So if you go look at the stats, the reason why I talk about this, So what happens if a hurricane passes through Herbert Box 1? Since 1950, North Carolina has just as much chance to get hit as Florida. Only 20% of the storms go out to sea without hitting any land. And here's what I was just talking about. Only 8.8% of storms make it into the Gulf of Mexico when passing through Herbert Box 1 as a hurricane. So you have a 1 in 5 chance of going out to sea. You have a 1 in 5 chance of a direct landfall in Puerto Rico, which with a wobble west we might just get. But less than 10% chance of the storm making it into the Gulf of Mexico. So sure, 9%, 8.8% chance. It's possible. Some models have been hinting at it. I do not believe it'll happen. I like to play the odds. 8.8% is not very good in my opinion for this to make it into the Gulf of Mexico. I just don't believe it's going to happen. Not going to happen. So now that we got the stats let's hop into the models here. So I'm going to start off with the GFS. This is 6Z run from this morning. Back it up to hour 0. Alright, let me pull this into focus for you. Alright, as you can see, this is 10 meter winds. I could use surface pressure, and that will show a little bit lower pressure, more in line with what we have with right now. And, actually, before we get into this, let me jump back to the hurricane hunters. These guys are the unsung heroes. They're out there providing the data that which we, is unbelievable data they provide. So as you can see, we got one plane going through the system right now. I'm going to refresh this because I haven't refreshed it in about 20 or 30 minutes. Pressure down to 927 millibars. That's a drop of 3 millibars since the plane originally made its first pass. As you can see here, 927 millibars in the eye of the Hurricane Irma. If I click on this here, we can get an idea of surface winds. These surface winds right here, unbelievable. If you move that over, you're talking about 145 to 150 knot surface winds. That is why the National Hurricane Center has it at 180 mile per hour sustained winds. Hurricane Irma is no joke. Flight level winds equally as high, 145, 150 knot winds. Pressure getting mid 920s. It's dropping like a rock. Winds have already adjusted to it. Some hurricanes take time for the winds to catch up to the pressure. Irma is already there. It's pretty wild what's going on right now. 180 mile an hour sustained winds, Category 5. So as you can see, they're making their passes through here. They go in these zigzag directions to get each quadrant of the storm. And if you check this out, you can clearly see the west-northwest movement now. Next couple hours, it should eclipse 17th north, and that's what we want to happen. We want to get as far away from Puerto Rico and the islands as we possibly can, because the storm's large and dangerous. That's pretty much it. Large and dangerous. So now let's get back to the models here. 6Z GFS run. We're going to put this into motion here. Skirts the top of the islands, northern end of the islands, and just north of Puerto Rico. Look how close that is. You're in the tropical storm force winds. You're just outside the core of the hurricane force winds. Just a little wobble, another couple hours of a more due west and west-northwest movement, and you're right in the core or hurricane force winds of a major hurricane. It's not something you want to be in. So we continue to put this in motion. Well north of Dominican Republic, you guys are getting outer fringes of the system, large surf, gusty winds, scattered, very heavy, possibly torrential rains. And as we move, we're at 60 hours right now. As we get to 72 hours, Hurricane Irma is just battering the southern Bahamas. 921 millibars. That is likely too high as we're already into the 920s. And here we go. We're getting through the Bahamas in 90 hours. And as you can see, it's north of the National Hurricane Center track, and it's north of the northern side of Cuba. Do not believe it's going to reach Cuba. That is too far south, in my opinion. There are many factors steering this hurricane. High pressure, troughs, you name it. There's a lot going on. It's a very tough forecast, to say the least. I'm going to keep moving this forward here. It drops 905 millibars on Saturday, 102 hours out from now. It's unbelievably deep, and it continues to deepen. 890 millibars Saturday afternoon. It seems too low. That is right around the record. I believe the record for the Atlantic is 882 millibars. Hurricane Wilma, if I remember correctly, which was also a Category 5 monster, made landfall in Florida. It's just, I don't know if it's overdone. I hope it's overdone because that is catastrophic beyond anything we've ever seen. It could rival some of the big names. One of the A storms back in 1992, Florida, you know about that. This could easily rival that. So let's keep this in motion here. 120 hours out, 5 days, 892 millibars closing in on Miami Beach, Florida. This is not my forecast. This is the 06Z run from the GFS. I'm going to show you the Euro right after this, which is further west and south. I'll tell you what I'm leaning towards in a few seconds here. But let's continue this run out. We're not going to go too far into the future because right about at 4 to 5 days, the skill level and track just goes through, or just goes away. It could be off hundreds of miles, as we seen a couple days ago. GFS and pretty much every model was bringing a hurricane into this area here, and then it was numerous strikes in the North Carolina, a couple in the South Carolina, one up at Long Island, and now it is down to Florida. This is going to be the area of impact, I believe now. So let's keep this run going here. Let me go back to that. Whoops. Just a major hurricane landfall on the east coast of Florida. Miami-Dade area, Pompano Beach, Fort Lauderdale, Boca Raton, Deerfield Beach, everywhere from the southernmost tip of the Florida Peninsula to Cape Canaveral. Extreme hurricane conditions. Just a devastating storm if this model run is correct. And then it brings it up as still a 922, probably a major hurricane still, because it never really got too far inland. If you watch that, just skirts the coast and then crashed ashore right along the Georgia-South Carolina border. It's likely a Category 3 major hurricane. It's unbelievable. That would cause so much damage and devastation. FEMA is stretched so thin already due to Texas and Harvey. This would just be an ungodly, unimaginable situation there. So let's pray that is wrong. Let's hope that is wrong. And best case scenario right now, honestly, it's not going to slip out the sea. I do not see it slipping out the sea. I do not see it slipping into the Gulf of Mexico. Best case scenarios here is if it continues more westward, runs over Dominican Republic, crashes into Cuba. Cuba rips it to shreds. Cuba's not all mountains, but if it runs into one of the mountains, it could shred it apart. You know, we're not talking about down to a tropical storm Category 1, but won't be a Category 5 if it runs into Cuba. So this is one of the worst case scenarios possible on this run here. It's such a populated area, such an expensive area. Miami's one of my favorite places I've ever been to. On a normal high tide, there's about a foot between the bays and the roads. So it doesn't take much of a storm surge to flood that town. And this would be very bad. So let's hop into the Euro here and see what the Euro is showing. This is from last night, the most recent run from the European model. And as you can see, it gets a little bit closer to Puerto Rico than the GFS. You're into the hurricane force winds, no doubt, in this run here. So put this in motion 72 hours out, skirting northern Dominican Republic, and barely touches the Bahamas, really, just the southernmost point of the Bahamas. But this is what I was talking about. Slams it right into Cuba. Already weakens it. Once it's over Cuba, look at that, up 13 millibars in a matter of 24 hours. It'll probably weaken it more than that if it's that long over Cuba. Next frame, we're at 5 days right here, parked over top of Cuba. This would be the best case scenario for Florida. Weakens it, mountain shredded a little bit, loses some of its punch, but then it moves right up north into the Keys, west coast of Florida. Then the Euro brings it right up the peninsula from Key West to Orlando. Just a terrible solution also, but it would be weaker than the GFS. If there's anything to hold out hope for, is if it crashes into Cuba, it will weaken. Still a major hurricane, still a category likely 3. Just bad news. Then it takes it up into, Georgia and South Carolina as a weakening tropical system. Bottom line is, Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, you have to prepare for a category 4 or 5 hurricane. Do it now. Don't wait. Gather your documents, get your gas, get your water, do the stuff you need to do now. So 2 days from now, you're not scrambling, fighting people at the supermarket, waiting in 3-hour line for gas. It's just not worth it. Start doing it now. I want to get into a couple other things before I wrap this up. This is the microwave imagery from today, about 2 or 3, 4 hours old. This is the core of Major Hurricane Irma. This is about as perfect as you'll ever see in the Atlantic Basin. The eye is perfectly protected. There is no dry air. There's nothing impeding the development of this system at all. This is, quite honestly, one of the best ones I've ever seen in the Atlantic, and it'll probably be the best you'll ever see for many, many, many years to come. It just doesn't get any better than this. It's a scary thought. Does not get any better than that, though. One more image I want to show you. This is from my Twitter feed a couple days ago, or actually yesterday morning. I talked about this. So I want to talk about my track. Yesterday I had from just south of Miami, just north of Cape Canaveral, and then back up in the central South Carolina to the Outer Banks is my target zone. Talked about the Herbert box. Florida, North Carolina, equal chance of getting this system. 8% chance of it going into the Gulf, 20% chance of it going out to sea. I don't believe it's going to hit Cuba. I believe come up somewhere in the Miami area. Pretty much from this area on, can expect likely a direct landfall. I can't rule out over here, even though I don't think it's going to happen. And I can't rule out a Matthew type track where it just skirts the coast area. I would more lean towards skirting the coast than the west coast right now. That's my honest truth, honest opinion. I don't believe it's going to get to the west coast of Florida. I don't think so. But you can't rule it out. Many models show that. Cannot rule that out. So yesterday, I'm going to stick with this. These are my impact zones from north of Cocoa Beach or north of Cape Canaveral down to just south of Miami and really the beginning of the Keys. And then after it passes through here or comes up like this, it should, again, impact. It'll get back over water more than likely. I don't believe it's going to track up the peninsula like the Euro has. It could. I don't think so. Really from Savannah, this might be a little far north, this one here. So really from Savannah to the Outer Banks also needs to watch this. Expect another landfalling hurricane. It's a couple days later, day and a half, 2 days later from the South Florida impacts. But you got to watch it. So expect to track something like this maybe, and then up, or possibly like this, and up, or even if it doesn't, the ridge isn't as strong, could come up like this, and then up. There's a lot of possibilities of it right now. But you got to prepare. As for storm surge, depends the direction where it approaches at. If it comes from, just underneath of Florida, from north to south, or south to north, or in this direction here, just wherever direction it comes from, storm surge is going to be huge. We're talking about a category 4 or 5 for the next 3 or 4 or 5 days. The storm surge will be huge. It could be 10, 15, 18 feet in spots that are, more prone to storm surge. Winds, I'm not even going to go with winds, 100 plus, 130, 140 plus possible. Torrential rains, 15 inches of rain, 10 to 20 inches of rain in spots. All depends about the track. If it pushes up in this area here, from this direction, these little notches along the coast are just going to get crushed with storm surge. Absolutely crushed. The Keys, it could rival some of your big ones from 80 years ago. Be prepared, South Florida. That's all I can say right now. Be prepared. Don't wait. Don't make excuses. It's on you. Prepare yourself right now. And hopefully this thing turns out to sea. I don't think that's going to happen. So we're going to get back to the satellite one more time. We're going to refresh this. before I finish out this video, just get one more view with this and see if there's any more northern drive. Just about to cross 17 north. It's getting there. So we're going to watch the next couple hours, see what kind of trends are on satellite. There's a radar in Puerto Rico, so we'll be able to see that tomorrow, how well it's doing, the eye wall, etc. And see if there's another pass for the hurricane hunters before I close this out. No, they're way down here on the southern end of the system, and it's going to be a while for another pass. So as you can see, it is moving west-northwest in recent hours, deepening rather quickly down to 927 millibars, and that is quite strong. Be prepared. Follow me on Twitter, Stormforce_1. There's only one of me. There's a couple fake accounts. Do not follow them. Stormforce_1. I'll have another update likely later this evening. Be prepared. Prepare now, Florida, Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, northern islands east of the Puerto Rico. Prepare now. Don't wait. God bless.